So if you watched my previous video, I pretty much spent that entire time trash talking ArenaNet and their marketing strategy, or the lack thereof. So in this video, I wanted to highlight one of its absolute best features. And honestly, one of the ways that they solved the most common problem that we have when talking about fantasy or class fantasy within any MMORPG. One of the biggest issues with MMORPGs is class fantasy. How do you keep a profession, how do you keep a class interesting without diluting the main fantasy too much? Of course, they can always add new content, new features, new currencies, and all that to add flavor, different type of content. But I have a feeling a lot of MMO players are really more interested in that class fantasy. We want to be that condition damage renegade. We want to be that, great sword dragon hunter. That's who we want to be, and that's why we are emulating them in our play. Or if we just really want top stats. But from one expansion to the next, usually not a whole lot changes with your class. I mean, you might get some tweaks or some mild changes, but outside a complete class rework, it stays the same. The biggest decision in my mind that you make in an MMORPG is what class you pick at the very start, what class you play as your main. The reason being is because that class is the lens in which you view the entire game. If you pick a profession or you pick a class that you are not that thrilled about, you're not going to be that thrilled about the game. But if in your mind you are a hunter, a ranged damage dealer, hey, ranger is going to be your best friend, and that game is going to be infinitesimally better because you were playing something that you actually enjoy. Go figure. But now the problem with that is that after you've played for so long, it stays relatively the same. Like, you master the rotation, it becomes second nature, it's autonomic, your hands do most of the work and you're just on autopilot. And I kind of feel like this is even further because with Guild Wars 2, once you get your ascended level or legendary gear, you're set. That's it. Let's go get that map completion, I guess. And how can we make people interested in that new change? And with the release of Heart of Thorns, ArenaNet made history, in my opinion. ArenaNet answered the MMORPG question of how do we recreate the class fantasy without creating a new class? That was a crazy long intro. For those of you who haven't met me, I am the Caffeinated Dad. I wanted to take this moment to say, first off, thank you for watching my video right now, and I hope you stick around for the rest. But I wanted to take a moment to mention some things that I'm doing outside of just my videos here. First, I'm on a mess of other social platforms, so Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, which is very, very seldom that I actually get to stream. Usually I'm making videos for you guys, but hopefully one day we'll be there. And I also have my own podcast. I record weekly. If you enjoy my content here and you want to follow me on other social media platforms, the links are down in the description below. I would very much appreciate it. So anyway, class fantasy is a tough one to get. I feel like it falls to whichever game you're playing, whichever style or mentality that the creator has when they're developing the game. I mean, think about across all MMORPGs, how many different iterations of a warrior have you seen? Or a berserker? Or a barbarian, which are kind of all the same. Each game is going to have a unique spin to their iteration, and, of course, balancing out the thematics with also making sure that the class performs well or well enough. It's tedious. And also it goes to the player's opinion. Do the people who play the game actually enjoy that interpretation? You gotta appease the player base, Now, if we look at the way that Guild Wars 2 has set up a lot of the professions, I actually enjoy this because there's semi-rigid roles. It isn't necessarily like there's a dedicated tank, there's a dedicated healer, and dedicated DPS. There are dedicated DPS, but your own survival is a lot more dependent on your positioning and your timing of your skills, and less related to how well other people are playing. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't healer specs or healer emphasized specs, but a lot of the times it falls down to you. You got to make sure that you're paying attention. Also, in regards to Guild Wars 2, the way that they have set up the skills and the abilities tied to individual weapons, you go from a short sword to a great sword, and then it's boom, you have like essentially 3 to 5 new abilities. That's really cool. It keeps that uniqueness there. It's viable. It's fun. Now, if we look at the way that World of Warcraft did it, where if you had a two-handed axe, a two-handed sword, or a two-handed mace, it didn't really matter. A mortal strike, which is the arms warrior's bread and butter, the mortal strike is a mortal strike, and that's it. It doesn't really change anything. Also, being able to swap weapons while in combat, albeit on a cooldown, to have a bunch of new abilities, that's pretty cool. One of the problems that comes with developing any kind of new content, obviously with any games, is just the time commitment. Let's be serious. And especially if you were trying to create a new class from scratch or based off of an idea, it takes a lot of time. You have to create the animations, you have to develop kind of like the core of the character, and then, you know, spread that across all the viable races. It's tedious and time consuming. And then even from that, upon release, you have to balance the hell out of it so that it doesn't overpower all the other professions or underpower the profession. I remember, again, another WoW reference, when they released the Death Knight, which was the first hero class for Wrath of the Lich King. And you could essentially play any of the 3 available specs for the Death Knight, and you would just absolutely trash can people. PvP, dungeons, you could tank anything. It didn't matter. It took a lot of balancing and time for them to get to a sense of equality with other professions and other classes. But outright creating a new class is not the way that Guild Wars 2 went with it. They went a more unique route, elite specializations. And obviously, you know, you have to be max level, and then you have to dump a whole bunch of hero points into it. But that was probably one of the best ways to keep class fantasy and not dilute the rest of the game. I mean, and it's not hard to add on to a class that's already existing. It's not hard to add on a new specialization. I mean, you just have to thematically think about it. I mean, look at the Thief into the Deadeye. Okay, so the Thief is shadowy, you know, backstab, poisons, bleeds, evasion, stuff like that. And assassin, we'll say a ranged assassin or sniper, is, you know, cold calculated from a distance. That's not too far of a leap. Or if we even look at like the ranger into the druid, the ranger is already the nature go-to guy. I mean, like that's his character, that's his class. And then you gave him the druid spec, which is just doubling down on that. I mean, that thematically makes sense. And that's just an easy way to add diversity to the rest of the game without necessarily upheaving that game. ArenaNet and Guild Wars 2 are revving up for another expansion, another fun one coming up in End of Dragons, and I'm very excited. Obviously, if you've watched any of my previous videos, I'm hyped. I'm ready to go. And they have released 6 of the 9 available elite specializations. I actually think at the time of recording this, we just got the picture for the Ranger, which I swear to God, I see that's the new spec. It isn't a hammer, it's just your pet at the end of a stick and you're just whacking away. And honestly, the new elite specializations are probably one of the biggest reasons people are coming back. The biggest reasons that people are excited about the game. And honestly, like when I talk to a lot of players, the reason that they are excited about the game and continuously want to play it is because there are these unique professions. Even like the older professions, like people still are fanatical about it, which is awesome. And I want to kind of close with this final note that the elite specializations could have been their own classes. They could have been their own profession on their own. You could have had the Thief, you could have had the Daredevil, you could have had the Deadeye, 1, 2, and 3, and they could have all been their own unique professions. And I actually don't like that idea. I don't like the way that would have gone. All of these capabilities into a single profession and expanding on it thematically. So again, you're keeping within that class fantasy, but then you have a ton of versatility, which does nothing but help the player. Because I'll be honest with you, some days I might want to be, for this example, for the Thief, a Deadeye. And, you know, like, hey, in, 2 days I could be like, I want to pick up a stick and start whacking people and be the Daredevil. And you know what? I have that capability. I don't have to go and level a brand new profession or a brand new class. So this is the right way to handle this. You add the class fantasy without diluting the main one too much. This is the problem with MMORPGs that I've found that Guild Wars 2 solved. I don't even know if they intended on it, but damn, they nailed it. And honestly, I feel like a lot of other MMOs, I'm surprised that they haven't capitalized on this thought as far as expanding class fantasy. I mean, shoot, I would. What is your favorite elite specialization? Tell me in the comment section down below. As always, I am the Caffeinated Dad. I'll see you guys around.